Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Thank you to everyone for your patience. We had a little mix up since we're on Eastern time and our speaker tonight is on Central time. Um, so thankfully she's very quick hopped right on and we're ready to go now. So my name is Loretta Cohen and I am with an organization called Westchester Communities That Care. We're so grateful to be partnering with Westchester Area School District on this parent speaker series. We have several throughout the course of the school year each year. And beyond these speaker engagements that we organize or deliver, we have a lot of things that we have our hands in, but primarily we're concerned with anything that would stand in the way of successful outcomes for children. And so we cover all sorts of different topics in the Parent Speaker Series. We also get very much involved with the prevention of underage drinking and substance use for teens, and really like to look at how we can cultivate a culture throughout our entire community where where people are supportive of what youth need in order to be successful in those realms. So, for example, we right now have a campaign that we've just started, and you might start to see it on billboards around our community or on social media, talking about the importance of connection. And so this is certainly very timely, and we were so thrilled to be able to bring in our speaker. We know full well from research we've done how important connection is. And we also know that the way our children in the Westchester area have been connecting is getting less and less. Um, they still bond pretty well with their immediate families in their homes. Um, but outside of that, with finding other trusted adults and being connected to your neighborhoods or your communities is also super important. So that's something we're starting to focus on. And we're going to talk tonight all about bonding with children. So grateful to have Dr. Collier here with us. She is a PhD, a therapist, and an educator. She has a comprehensive prevention model that teaches neurodevelopmental effects of risky behavior. And we're so grateful to have her here with us. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Okay, now I'll share my screen. And
And
okay.
and while you're getting that ready, we have one message to share for our Spanish-speaking population that may be here. Jocelyn?
Muy buenas tardes. Si necesita interpretación en español, por favor, apriete el botón en la parte de abajo a la derecha, eh, seleccionando el botón de español. Gracias.
All right. Thank you so much for choosing me to be here with you guys tonight. I am excited about this topic. So we're going to talk about bonding, and I study the brain quite a lot. And so when I think about bonding with kids,
Cuando yo pienso de cómo conectarme con los niños, pienso en desarrollo. Oh, tú estás pensando un pensamiento diferente que el mío. Esto no pasa por un tiempo y cuando pienso sobre el desarrollo neurológico es dependiente a la experiencia.
talking about our how the brain develops. And then we're going to move into, okay, what can we do to create healthy bonding and attachment with our kids? So I'm a big believer in parents being neurosavvy, brain savvy, and knowing their kids' neuro whereabouts. And so that is why I literally entitled my book, The Neuro Whereabouts Guide, which is available in English and Spanish on Amazon if you're interested. But I'm going to share with you what is in chapter 1. all about healthy brain development. Now, if we think about our kids' brains being under construction, I want you to think about in two major developmental stages. The first is from birth all the way up to about age puberty. When we grow, 200 billion neurons in our brain. It's like we get this big chunk of clay. We don't know exactly what that is going to look like, but we get all the clay that we're ever going to need. And then when we hit puberty, that kicks in the second stage of brain development. And what happens then is we start sculpting this brain into what will be our adult masterpiece. But it actually only has 100 billion neurons left over. So I think this is amazing because babies have about 90% of those neurons in that first stage by the time they're 6, 7 years old. This is a lot of brain cells that half of them we're not going to use. And so it's kind of an interesting thing that happens, that we grow all these cells and then we get rid of half of them. This is perplexing, I think. And so when I did a deep dive into this, I started to really get that the brain needs room for connectors. So let me show you what this looks like. This is an infant's brain cell, a little baby neuron, of course, magnified quite a bit so that we can see it. Now, what you'll see is that big cell body right there at the bottom, and then this long, what they call an axon, and then the connectors. What you see here that looks like tree branches and tree roots, those are called dendrites. And so I know I probably can't hear you guys, but I want you all to say dendrites 3 times fast. Dendrites, dendrites, dendrites. Okay, I'm trusting you guys, all right? So that is what is going to be your battle cry as a parent. Dendrites, dendrites, dendrites. Let me tell you why. These little connectors are the hardware of learning. Every time you learn something new or practice something, you literally grow new dendrites that reach out to other cells, making long chains of connections in your brain. I love these slides because it shows that little infant's neurons over there on the left growing all the way up to age 2 on the right. Wow. You can see that these connections are really growing. But imagine by the time a person is 25 years old, every neuron in the brain is connected to 10,000 other neurons. Woo, that's amazing to me. What you're literally looking at is a skill growing. We don't know what skill it is because this is the hardware of the skill. Now, the other thing that is really important to remember is that all of this growth is dependent upon the brain's rule. Use it or lose it. This is the brain's rule. The cells you're using are the ones that grow those connectors, those dendrites. The cells you're not using literally atrophy and slough off in that second stage of brain development. And so as those connectors are growing, they need space. The cells you're not using literally get pruned away. Now, all of those networks get thick and long and huge, and they have to fit inside your skull. So what we see is they have to squish down inside of your brain. And that is literally what makes those funky wrinkles and grooves in your brain. As you can see by this picture. I didn't know this until I studied neuroscience, that babies actually have very smooth brains, the surface of their brain, and they get wrinkly as these networks grow. These are good wrinkles, right? We want a lot of these. Here's the other cool thing. All that thickening that's happening is happening right behind your forehead, about halfway up your skull, in the part of the brain known as the prefrontal cortex or frontal lobes. Most people have heard about these today, and you can see it growing and developing on this beautiful brain study. These researchers had kids come into a fMRI, a brain x-ray lab, over time so we could see what was going on. The darker the color, the less gray matter, which is the nickname for brain cells, but the more white matter, which is the nickname for those connectors. They literally look white under a microscope. Now you can see that the prefrontal cortex is thickening with these amazing skills. This part of our brain is a really important part because it's in charge of executive functioning skills. Now remember, your frontal lobe right there in green, that is the CEO of your brain and your body. It does all of your major thinking, feeling, and doing skills, like basic, right? So it's the boss of your brain and your body. Now, those executive functioning skills grow according to 2 phases, and they're listed right here. Now, there's a lot of overlap as kids grow and develop, but they primarily are relegated to 2 stages. So the first one, on your left, birth up to puberty. When we grow, what scientists call lower level executive functioning skills. These are the skills that you need to wake up in the morning, get out the door, remembering your lunch, basics. Now, when we hit puberty, the brain starts to thicken with those networks, really start getting rid of cells to make long networks for higher level executive functioning skills. These are the ones that we need to get up and out of our parents' house, becoming fully self-supporting, relational, communicative adults. Now, what's really interesting for me is that because I started my career specializing in addiction, and what I know is that things like drugs and alcohol arrest the development of the brain. So if somebody starts using drugs and alcohol in that second stage, those are the skills that are not going to grow to their fullest potential. But what we see happening now is that addiction to technology, pornography, gambling, those can start younger and younger. So now we're seeing some kids that are not developing some of the early ones. So now you know your neuro whereabouts. When you think about neurodevelopment, you'll know which skills a child can do, which ones they can't. But what is critical to remember is the brain's rule. Use it or lose it. Now, here's how parents should use this in their favor. What you'll want to do is teach them these skills, memorize them yourself, memorize the names, and then make sure that you use this in your daily language. So for instance, you're going to say things to your kids like, "Oh, I love how you organize that. Wow, you really paid attention to the most important thing. Wow," instead, like you don't want to say nice task initiation. You want to use your own words. So instead of saying good task initiation, you might say, "Oh, you took out the trash and I didn't even have to ask you." Know and memorize these skills. There's not many. Know what they do, and then positively reward kids for using them. As they grow, you do the same thing. But remember, use it or lose it. So the example I always like to give is if you do all of your child's problem solving and decision making for them, they're not going to grow long networks of neurons for problem solving and decision making, but they will grow long networks of neurons for dependency on you to do their problem solving and decision making for you. So you're getting the brain's rule. It's what they're using that is important. Okay, now if you have questions about any of this, please go ahead and unmute yourself and just have to put that in the chat. But we're going to switch from brain development to attachment next. So if you have a question about brain development, please feel free to let me know. Okay. Get screen ready here. Now that you guys really understand how the brain develops, what's happening in there, now we're going to talk about attachment and bonding and what that looks like. And so I want to show you this really cool brain scan. They first scanned a mom and a baby together in a really cool scanning machine. And then what they did is they looked at the activity in the brain when we're bonding like this, and they superimposed it onto this X-ray. I so love this because what you're seeing is mirror neurons lighting up. It's such a beautiful picture. I really want to frame this because I just think it's so gorgeous. Because now, can you see how the babies and the mom's neurons are almost exactly lit up in almost exactly the same place? This is the mirror neuroning that's happening. So mirror neurons are located in lots of different places in our brain. And what they do is when someone else is feeling or doing something, they light up. It's how we learn. We can watch someone doing something, and the same areas that are lighting up in that person's brain light up in ours. That's why we don't necessarily have to get up and do it to learn it. We can watch someone else do it. Now that's the feel or the behaving part. It also lights up when people feel something. It's like when someone is feeling something intensely, you will too, because mirror neurons light up in your brain, and that's what bonds us to each other. Humans are tribal beings, and our babies are very dependent upon us. Like if we were a whale in the ocean, we would give birth and the baby would just start swimming around and be gone in just a few short months. Nope, our babies need us for many, many, many years. And so our brain has evolved to connect. And that's what mirror neurons do to help us connect. Now, what you can see is that mom's frontal lobe lighting up. That is where empathy and connection happen. But baby's frontal lobe is not fully developed yet, but you can see just the beginnings of it, that little teeny tiny part in there. Really interesting. So, okay, what I want to show you next is a video of a mom and a baby who are bonding with each other. They're doing something called co-regulation. And then in the video, the researcher asks the mom to stop co-regulating. And I want you to watch what happens.
Babies this young are extremely responsive to the emotions and the reactivity and the social interaction that they get from the world around them. This is something that we started studying 30, 40 years ago, when people didn't think that infants could engage in social interaction. In the still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I'm like a girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this, and then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, "Come on, why aren't we doing this?" Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
It's a little like the good, the bad, and the ugly. The good is that normal stuff that goes on, that we all do with our kids. The bad is when something bad happens, but the infant can overcome it. After all, when you stop the still face, the mother and the baby start to play again. The ugly is when you don't give the child any chance to get back to the good. There's no reparation, and they're stuck in that really ugly situation.
Whew. I couldn't see a lot of your faces, but it's painful to watch, isn't it? Now, it's important to remember that mom did not abandon her child. She didn't leave. But it looks like it when you see the reaction of the little girl. Now, the very beginning of that, let's see, let me get to this. The very beginning of the video, what you'll see is something called co-regulation. So baby looks, mom looks, points, mom looks, baby smiles, mom smiles, baby grimaces, mom grimaces. That's what we do with kids. We mirror their expression. Babies can't self-regulate. They don't even know they're actually having a feeling or an experience. They're in the experience. They don't have the ability to self-reflect. And so if they don't get a mirroring of what they're going through that mirrors back to them, they don't even know they're having that experience. There was an amazing study that was done back in the late 70s and early 80s in Russia and Poland. There had been a war that left a lot of babies orphaned. So many that there were 500 babies in a room in cribs with like one nurse per 500. It was tough. All the babies were always fed and always warm, but a large percentage of them died due to something called failure to thrive. If babies don't have an adult that is reflecting a baby's emotional experience, if they don't get warmth and held and cuddled, their brain does not light up the way it should. And some of babies just can't survive in that environment. We need somebody to co-regulate with us before we can self-regulate. And so the way that we do that is through a process called attunement. So I love this picture. It's a little grainy, but I couldn't find a better one. But I love this picture because we are using ourself as an instrument to tune in. So I'm going to read you Dan Siegel's description because I just love this definition of attunement. He says that when we attune with others, we allow our own internal state to shift, to come to resonate with the inner world of another. This resonance is at the heart of the important sense of feeling felt that emerges in close relationships. Children need attunement to feel secure and to develop well. And throughout our lives, we need attunement to feel close and connected. Okay, so if I did this, how does that feel? When somebody looks at their cell phone when you're in a conversation with them, it doesn't feel good. You have just lost attunement. They have just gone still face. So in the video, Dr. Tronick has been running that study at Harvard for 45 years. He's actually run it all over the world with moms and dads, all types of parents. And what he has found is that as young as 3 months old, babies develop one of two coping mechanisms. You actually got to see both in this video. The first is dysregulation. When we lose attunement, we will dysregulate, lose our posture, that high-pitched scream to try to get that back. Hey, where did you go? I need you to regulate. Come back. And if that is not met with reattunement, you saw just for a little bit, the baby looked away. Now, that is what we would call dissociation. Now, when I was in Boston, I got to see Dr. Tronick speak at a trauma conference. And he let us watch a couple other movie or still face examples. One of them was a mother and her child. The mother had been raised by a woman who had been in the Holocaust. She was so traumatized and shut down that she raised a kiddo that was very flat in affect. And she was raising, in turn, a baby that looked all around the room more than she did at her mother. Not a lot of emotional attunement and connection. She learned how to pretty much dissociate and not need or if it's not need is not the right word, but to do without that connection and survive. Another video that I got to watch, my doorbell just rang. Sorry, you guys. Another video that I just watched was sorry, I'm a little distracted. Was a woman who had been in an alcoholic, grown up in an alcoholic family system, and she had been sexually abused a lot as she was growing up. Every time that she heard her baby's cries, those high-pitched screeches, it triggered her own family of origin wound. And so what she did was jut out at her baby. Oh, baby, it's okay, baby. And you could see the baby do this every time. Misattunement, misalignment. Not really good at all. And so that baby learns how, okay, she's really inconsistent. I can come toward or go away. Attunement is how we learn to attach to our loved ones through the process of being able to co-regulate. In the very beginning of that still face video, you saw mom and baby co-regulating really well, very attuned to each other. If you put a QEEG or a heart rate monitor on both of them, you would see synchronized readings. And then, of course, when mom goes still face, those beatings desynchronize. And it's painful for baby and for mom. You can see on her face. As soon as mom comes back, the baby's like, oh, you're back. And they reconnect. Now, what Dr. Tronick said at the end is really important, because what you see is what we do with our kids all the time. We got to go to work. We have to leave. We disconnect. Kids freak out, right? But we consistently come back. If we are predictable, we create secure attachment. If we're inconsistent, we create anxious attachment. If we're inconsistent, neglectful, or abusive, we can create avoidant attachment. And if we're really discombobulated and inconsistent, we can create disorganized attachment. Now, the good news is that even if all that stuff happens, as an adult, we can repair it by being in a relationship with somebody who consistently co-regulates with us and can create a secure attachment. But one of the things, or really a few of the things on this list that you can do to co-regulate with your family, not just with your kids, but your partners as well, is, of course, be predictable. And then create the reunion effect. Every time you see them, ritualize your greeting. Oh, it's so good to see you. Put down what you're doing, stand up, go to the door, hug them, say their name. My husband's name is Taylor. I walk into the door, honey, Taylor, where are you? Reconnect together at reunion effect. Attune to each other, find out what was going on, make that person a priority, and then go about what you normally would do. Consciously attune. I did this presentation with teachers today, and we talked about how hard it is to consciously attune every class all day long and then come home and do it with your kids, right? Because consciously attuning means connecting into the inner world of another person. And then this last one here, do your foo work. I'll talk more about that in a little bit, your own family of origin work. Okay, let's talk about attachment styles. Attunement and co-regulation is how attachment styles are created, and an attachment style is usually created within the first 2 years of life. Now, it can change significantly depending upon our relationships, but in my book, I actually have this chart in chapter 1, which is about brain development. And here are just a quick description of what each attachment style looks like, and they're pretty different. Now, let me just self-disclose. I am a recovering anxious attachment kid because of my mom's inconsistent behavior growing up and struggling with her own mental health issues. And what my job was, which was really take care of her. And I had an absent father. And so I didn't get that piece of connection there. So it was really just all me and mom. Now, a large percentage of kids, about 65% have secure attachments. These are kids that explore. They're generally pretty happy. They know that their needs are going to be met. They're pretty content and they're engaged. But anxious attached kids, or maybe ambivalent, they're not sure. We're always anxious about whether you like me or not. We can get angry and throw a temper tantrum when we can't rely on other people to get our needs met, or we might be slow to warm up. Like I said, this is a short list. If you want more information about attachment, I would highly recommend, there's a book by Levine called Attached. Oh, such a great book, you guys. It literally has a list, like quizzes, so you can really understand what your attachment style is. And then, of course, avoidant. These are kids that don't explore a lot. They're more emotionally distant. They don't trust other people to meet their needs. They're more quiet and withdrawn, but they may act out for attention when they need it. And then you've got disorganized kids who really become depressed and passive and angry and shut down, non-responsive. They might be oppositional, but they have a lot of difficulty making friends. Here is what the attachment styles look like when we grow up. So to make it really simple, secure attached kids, they feel that they're okay and that pretty much everybody else is okay. Right? They're comfortable, they're interdependent, they can be self-sufficient, they can work with others. Anxious attached kids, we don't feel like we're okay, but everybody else is okay. For a great part of my life, I would walk into a room and always feel one down, that I had to prove myself in order to get you to love and like me. And so we get very excessively clingy. I would get a new friend and smother them. Or I had one of my friends told me one time it was the most difficult thing to hear, but such a good thing to hear. She said, Crystal, it always sounds like you're bragging. And I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. Because when I meet you, I feel like I have to tell you everything I did today, all the wonderful accomplishments that I have, so you'll love and like me. And to her, it sounded like bragging. Really interesting. So avoidant attached kids, they think they're okay, but that nobody else out there is okay. And they're really uber independent, uncomfortable with intimacy, and can be very dismissive. Disorganized attached kids, they don't feel like they're okay, but nobody else is okay either. They want approval from other people, but they're scared of intimacy. And they see relationships as being painful because they grew up with some painful relationships. Now, what's beautiful about attachment research is that researchers have gone well beyond childhood attachment and have looked at adult attachment and seen that we can repair attachment wounds if we engage in a relationship that it has a secure attachment. And guess what? We grow dendrites for the rest of our lives. So I know you probably can't read this list, and I'll share my slides with you. You don't have to read it, but I love this list because it shows you the 4 different attachment styles and what they show up like in conflict, maintenance behavior, emotional expression, self-disclosure, nonverbal intimacy, and social skills. What we can do is learn, what does a secure attached person do? And start emulating that. We can grow new dendrites. We grow them much slower when we're when we're older than we did when we were younger. But we can consciously make an effort to learn how to connect with our kids and our partners in new and different ways. Okay, that's attachment style. Anybody have questions on that? Okay, I'm going to move on to parenting style. Interesting research on bonding with children and the style of parent that you are. So this is Baumrand's 4 parenting styles. And there's been a lot of research on what the kids look like who were raised by these folks. So we have 4 different styles on 2 different continuums. The X-axis is, I call it the love axis, warmth, responsiveness, supportiveness. The Y-axis is behavioral control, demandingness. I call this the limits. Love and limits. Now, the healthiest parenting style is authoritative, and it gives you some words. The only word I don't like in this list is enabling, because we think of that word as enabling bad behavior, but this is enabling empowerment. This is a parent that has an equal amount of love and limits with kids. Those kids show up the healthiest. Permissive and authoritarian kids have a lot of problems, or kids who grow up with parents like that have a lot of issues growing up, good and bad. Authoritarian, high on limits, low on love. Permissive, high on love, low on limits. Here's the beauty of this. If you're in a relationship or you're co-parenting with someone who's really authoritarian and you're really permissive, if you guys have really good negotiation skills and can meet in the middle, you actually end up being the perfect authoritative parent to your kid. And so you can complain and whine about how maybe your wife is too strict and you as a husband or, want your kids to play more. But if you can really negotiate and meet in the middle, you really make a good balanced parent. Now, of course, the worst parent style is an uninvolved or neglectful parent. Now, let me show you this slide that shows you the effects. So this is a summary of what the research says. So you can see the words that define the kids who grow up with these different styles. Kids who have authoritative parents end up having really good secure attachment, self-control. They're pretty confident, have high achievement. They regulate themselves well. They're pretty socially responsible. They resist peer pressure. They say no to risky behavior more often, and they're pretty empathic. Kids who grow up with permissive parents have a lot of trouble keeping friends. They struggle with self-control. They may be very entitled because they've been given everything. They have difficulty regulating emotions and might be more hyperactive and impulsive, but they have really high self-esteem because they've been just told they're the bee's knees and they're just given so much, right? This could be stuff, or it could be privileges or no rules. Now, if you look on the other side of this, authoritarian kids, love high limits. They also struggle with self-control. They have low self-esteem and may be more antisocial. They don't trust their feelings. They may be more aggressive. They push back. They also struggle with achievement and friendships skills and have more delinquent behavior. Now, of course, the uninvolved or neglectful kids, those are the kids who fare the worst. But it's really interesting because permissive and authoritarian kids, they have more high-risk behavior. They have more high-risk activities that they engage in. They actually have higher rates of high school dropout. They don't go as far in college. They just don't fare as well. Gregory asked, can you please give us the slides when the meeting is done? Absolutely. I'll make sure that you have them because I want you guys to be able to go back and read all the little things that you want to see. So please know that. Okay, so we've talked about attachment. We've talked about the parenting styles. Now, it's important to remember we're not perfect. Families are not perfect. We all go through stuff, and we all have different attachment wounds that we can heal from. But there is a list that can share this with you. So, you know, when you have a parent who is chemically abusing or dependent, if there's trauma in your history, any kind of neglect, very intense emotions, people who grow up with parents who are ragers or extremely moody or depressed, chronic stress from different things like poverty, lots of moves, or even overindulgence. When we give our kids too much stuff and not a lot of rules and limits, that's really terrible parenting, and it creates overindulgence, which interferes with healthy attachment. When we think and expect the world and people to give us everything without having to earn it, we don't show up as very reciprocal, healthy adults in relationships. Now, I want you to think about parents who are struggling with these issues. Let's take chemical dependency or maybe chronic depression. What we see in the brain is it really shuts off the frontal lobe. So when you're thinking about this study, I want you to think about this from a parent's perspective, okay? This is a slide of a functional MRI looking from the top down into the brain. And okay, could somebody chime in? I go for an hour and a half, right? Or I have an hour and a half with you guys. Is that correct? Somebody unmute and let me know. I feel like I'm on a
Sorry.
time.
Yeah. We typically do an hour, actually.
Oh,
I
you
mean,
do? Okay. All right.
yeah.
Now I know how fast I need to go through the rest. Okay.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, I really didn't have the time right on my schedule, but we'll keep going. The first three slides are of somebody who is not intoxicated. All parts of the brain are on, no drugs, no alcohol, no depression. What you see is a brain that's all on. The bottom slide is somebody who has just used cocaine as a part of this study. The limbic system is lit up, full of dopamine. The frontal lobe literally is off. Remember, the frontal lobe is the part of the brain where we have lots of mirror neurons and all the empathy and the connection, the problem solving, the decision making, abstract reasoning. It's off. This can happen to us when we're really, really, really scared or depressed, really, really, really full of pleasure, like with drugs. But we are not very good parents, employees, human beings when our frontal lobe is off like this. And it arrests the development of those skills. So if we have parents that grew up doing this and their brain had arrested development, it's very difficult for them to show up. Like if they started using when they're 12 and didn't stop until they're 20, their brain won't look like that. And it takes a long time to heal from this. You can see this cocaine abuser 10 days sober and then 100 days sober. The frontal lobe is just starting to turn back on. And then it takes 18 months for the brain to return to normal levels. So if you're living with someone who has chronic anxiety, panic attacks, depression, substance use issues, chronic stress, mental health issues, they may look very self-centered. The world is all about them. Scientists call this acquired narcissism. The good news is you can unacquire it. You can stop, you can get help, you can get into recovery. The frontal lobe turns back on. Oh, you can attune again. But when your frontal lobe is off, can't attune. I mean, think about somebody who gets drunk and wants to drive home. Like they can't think straight. They're not using their frontal lobe because it's literally off. When we're really, really scared and into panic, it's hard to think. We can't really show up and attune for someone else. This is why doing our own work is pretty important. Now, this can create trauma bonds. Trauma bonds are strong, unbreakable. It is a psychological phenomenon. It is a real and normal reaction to an abnormal situation. And here's what it can look like. Attachment bonds are very healthy, reciprocal, interdependent. Trauma bonds are born out of panic, fear, domination. That parent is essential for survival. So you have to attach to them even more than you normally would. Secure attached kid and mom go to the park. What does that kid do? They're gone. They're playing. They turn around not to see if mom's there, but to just see where she is so they can go back and get their, juice pack. Anxious attached kid and mom go to the park. Anxious attached kid stays connected and holding onto mom's leg. Avoidant attached kid and mom go to the park. Avoidant attached kid stays close, but with their back turned, punishing mom for being a bad parent, but having to stay really close because they don't know what mom's going to do. Disorganized kid and mom don't go to the park. They just don't. That doesn't happen. So this can create major trauma bonds that create neuronal wiring in our brain. And then we go out with that wiring and plug into relationships that are very, very similar and use coping mechanisms that don't really work in healthy relationships. So what can we do? How can we treat and recover from early trauma bonds so that we can have healthy bonding with our own kiddos? Well, doing your work is important. This is one of my favorite books for that. If you think you may have had a toxic parent, please read this. This will teach you exactly what not to do and how to heal from trauma bonds. Make sure that you understand what your family of origin system is, what your society of origin or your religion of origin. Think about a family like a mobile. We have this beautiful co-regulation that happens that creates homeostatic balance. But when one person gets ill, it throws off the homeostatic balance. It still goes around. It just goes around in a candy-wampus way, and that can stay that way. If our brain is raised in that environment, we develop some pretty unhealthy coping mechanisms that worked then. I mean, it works to dissociate when you're being abused. It works really well to not trust if somebody's not trustworthy. It works really well to drink and change how you feel when you're feeling yucky all the time. But a lot of these coping mechanisms can create what I call a foo button. And so that's why it's important to do your foo work. I wrote a book, that was my second book that I published this year called Foo Mapping. And it's a workbook that can help you work through 5 neurodevelopmental stages to understand how your thinking, feeling, and coping mechanisms were created in response to what happened in your family. Now, we create these buttons. They're just a metaphor, right? But with that energy lives somewhere in our body. And we can be in our adult energy most of the time. But something pushes that button and we literally regress and think, feel, and act like we did when we were younger. from that very immature point of view and act it out. Try to use those same coping mechanisms. Our negative core beliefs are ruling us. And then when we get into a relationship with somebody who also has a foo button, we can push their button, and then they regress to an early age, and then they push our button, and then we're just two wounded kids trying really hard to have healthy relationships and attachment. So I think it's really important to understand what those things were and map them. And so the book takes you through those stages, and what you end up with is a full map. My button has a name. It's Mother. Some that may be the name of your button too. It could be Father. It could be some other things. When that button gets pushed, I go back to one of two ages. I'm either my 8-year-old self who's like, please love me, please like me, let me show you my resume. Or I go to my angry 16-year-old and I'm like, F off. I don't need, right? I have these two negative childhood energies, but when I unpush the button, move back into my adult energy, I know what to do and the new patterns that I need to practice. Okay, so what you can also do is create co-regulation in your relationships. Establish synchronous, reciprocal relationships, set healthy boundaries, and there are 3 things that you can work on. Learn how to be available, secure, and responsive in your relationships. Creating a healthy attachment with the people that you love. Remembering that the primary vehicle in which children grow and bounce back is the relationship. So I wrote this book and I talked about all the terrible things that could happen. Then I thought, oh my God, I need to write about like how do kids bounce back? So I did some really amazing research on resiliency. I did a month literature review on this, and they all use the same list because resiliency is actually pretty simple. Building resiliency, the ability to bounce back, here's the list. This is really interesting to me because let's read this list. I believe my mother loves me. I believe my father loves me. Other people take care of me. They love me too. My loved ones spend time with me. They like to make me feel better. My parents and neighbors and friends seem to like me. Teachers, coaches, youth ministers, leaders are helping me. My family cares about how I'm doing. Now, if we keep going down here, we finally see something that doesn't have to do with connection. I can be independent and a go-getter. I have rules in my family. 2 that really don't have anything to do with a relationship between others or yourself. This is what builds resiliency. When you know that there's one person out there that gives a shit about you, pardon my French, then you can bounce back. And so that's why it's so important to use tools like validation, co-regulation, connection. And if you guys want some more information about this, all of my research and work I put together in a video series from kindergarten through 12th grade. There is a list of all the topics on knowyourneuro.org, a list of all the skills, and the videos are also listed on one page by age. There is a family page just for parents to learn more about these topics and get some more tools to help you. So I will definitely send you guys my slides. I have lots more references than this. But also, please take a picture of this. This is really a good list of what's available out there right now. My neuro whereabouts guide available in English and Spanish. There's the QR codes. Foo mapping is there. And I just recently published my kids' books. And they are Know Your Neuro, Adventures of a Growing Brain. And in Know Your Neuro, there's a K through 2 version and a 3 through 5 version. And you get to go on adventures with the superhero Neuro. Isn't he cute, you guys? Oh my God, I love him so much. And so you get to go on adventures with Neuro with your kids, teach them about how the brain works. And then there'll be 9 books coming out after this one. So you can go on lots of adventures with Neuro. Neuro makes good choices. Neuro sets boundaries. Neuro says no. Neuro feels feelings. Neuro accepts their body. You get the idea. We're teaching them a lot about executive functioning skills. Okay, Sharon says, thank you so much. This was so helpful. It's so encouraging to know that our brains are capable of healing and changing. Absolutely, they are. Okay, Do you guys have questions for me? Loretta, anything else pop up? Thanks for putting that in the chat, Beth. Or Mary Beth, sorry, thank you.
While people are thinking, if anybody has any questions, certainly unmute yourself and let us know or pop it in the chat. I did want to take a minute to put this, I'm putting a link in the chat to an evaluation. We'd love if you guys would take a second just to let us know what you liked about this presentation, or what you'd like to see us have presentations on in the future. So please, it's super quick. We hope you'll help us out by doing that. And then again, just to let folks know, our organization, our coalition meets once a month. Our next meeting is on March 14th. We're specifically going to be inviting parents. We'd love to get your input into what the speaker series should look like next year. We're also going to have a representative there from NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Health in our area. Does anybody have any other questions or anything for Dr. Collier while we have her here? Okay, we're super grateful. Thank you, Dr. Collier. It was fabulous. I know I was, very attentive to. I know I had my video off, but I didn't leave. I was right here the whole time. It was
Okay, good.
really
Good.
fascinating, and just, I really appreciated all the information. It was
Oh,
fabulous.
here's a question. Sorry, Loretta, let me jump in because
Sure.
Gregory asked, what about people who are bipolar? So I'd like to learn more about that question, but what I make up is that you're asking about their bonding or their parenting. People who have bipolar disorder, as you know, vacillate between extreme depression and extreme mania. The mania can show up as an irritable manic, or it can show up as a hyper manic, and it doesn't have to be extreme. It can be smaller ups and downs, but that creates some insecure, potentially disorganized attachment in relationships, because we as humans need to bond predictably and consistently. And so I think that it's important to know that about your mental health issue and be able to address that in getting your own help, but also going to family therapy for that, because you can still show up as an awesome parent, but if you're able to talk about how your inconsistency affects your family and validate them and how that affects them, at least you can repair those ruptures, right? That will occur in any family, but maybe a little bit more if you struggle with bipolar disorder. And Gregory, please chime in if that's not quite what you were asking, but I make up that's what you were thinking of. This is the thing about Zoom, right? It doesn't make for healthy attachment. Oh, good. Okay, I got some feedback from you. That's what I was asking. Okay, good. Well, you guys, I would love to come back and do a more presentations, maybe on FOO mapping. We can do a really good one there. Anything else about all the subjects in my book? You might get some more ideas too if you go to knowyourneuro.org. It's a free website, so please let schools know about it, let teachers know about it. It's really designed to be a prevention program to increase executive functioning skills and reduce high-risk behavior. So Loretta, thank you so much for having me come. Sorry, I might have scared you earlier when I didn't show up on time. Yeah, forgive me for
That's
that.
all right. We're all used to it. I mean, things happen, and you were so responsive when I called. So perfect.
Oh, good.
I can't believe how quickly you got on and we're ready to go. That was great.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Okay, well, thank you, you guys. If there's anything else, all right, sounds good. We'll definitely do that. Okay, Loretta, you take it over from here.
Okay. Thanks again. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us. Don't forget to keep your eyes out for our campaign, a public health message campaign you'll be seeing around Westchester on connections, actually. The links from those ads are going to take you to a web page with lots more information on connection, its importance, and different ways we can help kids stay connected and be more connected. Yeah. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a
Yes.
fabulous
Thanks,
night.
Jocelyn. Great job.